And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RCPA chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Fighting downside FD off. Bring in FD off. Off. It's orange!
45! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage.
Look at this!
Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You dead? We don't need any more of these.
Good evening. You are looking live right now in Starbase as Ship 31 is ready to make its way to the launch site, hopefully to be flying just 1 week from today on Starship Flight 6. I am Sawyer Rosenstein and I will be hosting tonight's roll. And as always, though, as much as I like rolling and the ship likes rolling, I won't be rolling alone. Joining me on comms tonight, we have Trevor. How's it going, Trevor?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely crazy that we're already talking about the rollout for Flight 6 of Starship. So I'm doing pretty good. Lots of cool stuff to talk about on this vehicle and excited to be here.
Oh, there's so much to talk about with it. And also joining us tonight is D Wise. D, how are you?
I am doing really well, and I am excited to be here to see this ship roll out to the launch site, a really important step ahead of Flight 6.
From Falcon to Starship, and the person pushing the buttons, pulling the levers, making everything happen behind the scenes is Mr. Kevin Michael Reed, KMR himself, along with an amazing team of people from SBL that are helping to run all of these cameras for tonight's roll. A reminder, as always, you can tag us at NASASpaceflight in chat, and we will do our best to answer as many of your questions as we can. As we get a beautiful tilt up here with the camera, taking a full look at Ship 31. Trevor, anything sticking out to you seeing it up this close right now?
Yeah, I mean, the most obvious thing is we saw that those 8 columns of heat shield tiles have been removed on either side of that heat shield, and you can kind of see all of those pins. And why SpaceX is doing this is because they just want to get data as to how the heat shield performs without that section, right? On these suborbital test flights, especially now that they're on the last version 1 ship, they are just trying to, right, the payload is data, as they like to say. So they're trying to get as much data out of this vehicle as possible, and part of that is they want to learn in the future, when they're attempting to catch these ships, how important are those heat shield tiles on the side? Because it'd be much easier if they were able to just remove them and have the chopsticks, kind of slam into the sides and go down the sides, just like we saw with Super Heavy. So that's the main thing. And then, of course, those 8 columns have also been removed on the other side. But I think in general, it's crazy that this is the last version 1 ship that is going to fly.
That is a really good point. I mean, obviously you've got stainless steel, so you've got something that is usually pretty good with heat on its own, but adding in the tiles with it to see what is and isn't necessary. I mean, it seems like definitely necessary for the flanges where the flaps are, but we've seen 2, one almost burned through and a second one that was a little less burny, but still kind of burning.
I've got to say, seeing that shot looking right up to the top of Starship really helps show the scale for all of this that is sometimes hard to gather. So I really love those shots from right up close to Ship 31 here.
Yeah, it's just, this is so cool seeing it up close and on the way out. The fact that we're getting this close to launch and seeing it roll is just So exciting. Now, Trevor, there's definitely some different colored tiles, it looks like, on that heat shield. For those who don't know, why would that be?
Yeah, so I think right there are two major ways that this heat shield is different. Of course, there's the white bit kind of between all of the tiles, and that is a gap filler. So that is SpaceX trying to, I don't actually know what substance goes in there, but make it so that plasma can't really enter those gaps between the tiles as easily. And then additionally, there are a few somewhat silver-looking tiles, and we're expecting those to be the aluminium-coated tiles, just like we saw on the last flight. And we think SpaceX is probably doing this again, just to get a little bit more data of how different heat shield designs and tile substrates and whatnot work. So there are a few of those on this vehicle as well.
There you go. And another good question here that I saw, and I'll put this one to you, D. Any idea why they might roll the ship before the booster, considering that the ship has to go on top of the booster?
You know, that's a really good question, and I don't think we have a solid answer for that. Of course, the ship will make its way out to the launch site, but unlike usually, it won't be able to just position itself in the chopsticks to be lifted up. So that is a great question that we don't really have an answer to.
Yeah, it's SpaceX. You know how it is with SpaceX. Sometimes they don't tell you all the reasons why, but you know they have their reasons. Now, we mentioned this is the final rollout of the Block 1 ship. What have we seen so far, Trevor, as they work at Starbase on the Block 2 version of the ship? Have we seen any updates?
Oh yeah, so we had the first Block 2 ship roll out to Massey's, I think probably on the order of 2 weeks ago at this point, and it underwent a bunch of cryogenic testing there. And it has since been rolled back to the Mega Bay, and I believe is now, they're doing the final preparations as to prepare it for engine testing and whatnot. But that Ship 33 is going to be right. It's going to be flown on Flight 7. It's the only vehicle that could be flown on Flight 7 unless something catastrophic happens, and it has a whole number of upgrades. The biggest one and most noticeable one is those two forward flaps that you see on screen right now. Those got moved windward a little bit. So they're further back on the vehicle and no longer about 180 degrees apart. And the reason why SpaceX did that is that will allow them to kind of hide the hinge mechanism behind the bow shock in that plasma flow. And that will hopefully eliminate the burn through that we have seen on those forward flaps on both Flight 4's reentry and Flight 5's reentry. And of course, there are a whole bunch of other upgrades to the ship. Like I believe the heat shield is a bit different. There's like a bunch of plumbing changes and whatnot, but that's by far the most noticeable change that you can easily use to identify if a ship is Block 1 or Block 2.
It will be really cool to see them. Maybe they'll do one side by side at some point, although I guess the only other one that they would be able to use after this flight is, dare I say its name, Ship 26. Oh.
I like that idea.
Of course you would. You also like the stubby nozzle.
If it's efficient and it works, what's there to complain about?
I can think of a lot of things, but as this rolls on, we'll roll along. And actually, I got a question for you. Six String Simpleton is wondering, because D, you've been to Starbase, and I believe we'll be back there for this flight. Can anyone just be on the side of Highway 4 during a rollout or an event like this? Just pop down a blanket and watch it roll by?
So, not everywhere along the highway, but for a significant amount of it, yes. There are a lot of different locations, both by the production site and by the launch site, where you are able to sort of be positioned and wait and watch these boosters and these ships roll by. I got a really great view, I believe, of Booster 10 with Jack during one of my previous trips, watching that roll after a launch. And also, I was able to see Booster 12 roll back from the launch site after it launched and was caught. And so that's always really cool. But there are cops who will tell you exactly where you can and cannot be. So it's important, if you are out there, to stay out of the way, not cause any issues. And if they ask you to move back, it's probably because a rocket needs to be exactly where you're standing.
Well, it's just a slight detail. And then, of course, the note of if you are driving in that area and you don't know that a roll is happening, add some extra transport time. As you saw from that view, quite a bunch of cars that are now stuck behind it, not all of them associated with the move.
And something else interesting is you can actually get stuck on the beach. A bunch of us were at a campfire, and then we heard that the booster was rolling because someone who left the campfire was unable to get back into town because there's just that one road out of there.
Yeah, Highway 4 is pretty much your only option in and out of Starbase up where that production site and the launch site is.
The whole launch infrastructure, or build and launch infrastructure, really is in the middle of nowhere. Like, you're just in Brownsville, and then you go down this 2-lane road for a bunch of miles, and all of a sudden it's like, holy, there's Starship and all of this infrastructure. It's very cool.
I mean, cool, I think, is an understatement, and especially the fact that while it is a pain to get there sometimes, the public can get so close to these space vehicles, especially compared to somewhere like Kennedy Space Center.
Yeah, it's really a night and day difference between being able to walk out on the salt flats and right along the road and see these launch pads up close compared to, even if you are on center, you have a badge, there are these massive fences around those launch pads. So I'd argue that the general public gets a better view of launch pads and the operations at Starbase than even employees at Kennedy Space Center or the Space Force side get.
So here's a question, Trevor, because we're talking about the last of the Block 1 ships, and then moving ahead towards Ship 33. Steve wants to know, what about Ship 32? What's happening with that?
I believe they just never really finished building it. They realize that they're getting all of the data that they need to get out of this Block 1 and are just moving on to Block 2. So I don't think it ever, I know it never got finished. I have no idea how far it got, though.
Well, it's a good thing that SpaceX doesn't have a history of building vehicles and then trashing them, or worse yet, flying them, making them historic, and then removing them SN15.
Yeah, I'm really sad about SN15. That was my first time making it out to Starbase to see that fly, and to know that it's been scrapped is quite sad.
Yeah, not bitter. Except I'm totally
Ryan,
bitter.
Ryan in our back channel is saying that Ship 32 has not been touched in almost a year, so definitely not planned to do anything with it.
Yeah, bit of a shame. But on these ships, though, I remember the first flight, one of the big things was they finally opened, or the second flight, I should say. Once they got in towards the space area, they opened the Pez dispenser doors, and then they kind of got stuck and had issues closing. Deed, what's happening with the Pez doors? It seems like that's not really a thing for this flight.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it here. So I'm sure we'll get some more information on that. But this time around, they're really focusing on the relight of the Raptor engine.
Which is one of their primary objectives that they have pointed out. And that, I think, is also important to note as one of the bigger differences on this flight from Flight 5. Because a lot of things are very, very similar. But that seems to be one of the major things, is the relight. Right, Trevor?
Yeah, so I would say the two major changes on this flight is the heat shield changes, as we were talking about earlier, which again are just for testing. And then the other test is they are wanting to do that demonstration of that in-space Raptor relight burn. So to do this, we are expecting SpaceX to probably do a pro grade burn. So they'll basically have, I don't know if it'll be two separate landing areas, or like a very elongated landing area. And basically, the ship will enter safely regardless of if they do or do not succeed in this burn. Uh, and then uh, they're just going to ignite, I think it's a single RVAC engine for probably, you know, under a second just to prove that they can do it, and get that data. And then that'll dictate where they splash down.
Which again is projected to be somewhere in the Indian Ocean, and with not Mars and no TAMS, it'll be exactly clear of where they're hopefully targeting for that. I do want to take a moment and thank some people here as we take a look at Ship 31. Jared House, thank you for the super chat saying there are tiles fitted with sensors in them. Yes, that is one of the main things. Is the tiles that are there is gathering that thermal heating data on reentry, as Trevor was pointing out, of where you can and need the tiles to be there, and where you could potentially go without the tiles, let the stainless steel be there, and use a catching mechanism for the future. Now, Gary Leonard, thank you for becoming a PadRat member. Josh Wilson with the tip at tips.nasaspaceflight.com saying, Godspeed Sparky. I think a lot of people forget, I know I did for a while, of this was the one that had that little electrical arc, shall we say, while it was over at Massey's, right? Right, Trevor?
Yeah, I honestly had forgotten about that, but yeah, they had some electrical problem. We never found out more information from SpaceX, but obviously it wasn't the biggest of deals given it's now gone through static fire testing, cryo testing, and soon to be, fully stacked on top of a booster.
Yeah, that was back in May of 2024. It did its first cryo. And it has earned the nickname Sparky. Let's hope that the only thing Sparky is the plasma as it re-enters on Flight 6 from now on.
But hopefully it doesn't eat through the flaps this time, so we want plasma but not sparks.
Something
Minor detail.
really interesting about that is that they are purposefully stressing the limits of the flap control and going in at a higher angle of attack during the reentry. So that'll be really cool to see how the changing angle during this flight's reentry could affect that. Because, of course, there will be more flap changes, but if they're stressing this flap design, clearly there's going to be data that they hope to gather from that can continue to help them with the redesigned flaps and moving forward with the next version of ship.
Yeah, see where the burn through might be, if there is any burn through, and if changing the angle impacts that. Well, yeah, we talked about end of the version 1 generation coming here, so it's a little bit of an interesting question. Six String Simpleton wondering, in your opinion, D, I'll start with you. What gets scrapped first? Booster 12, Ship 32, or the ship that shall not be named?
Ooh, okay. Ship 32, I think, will be the first to be scrapped. And then I don't know if I want to say Booster 12 will be scrapped, but certainly, like, they're going to be dismantling pieces of it, taking it apart for testing, analysis, all that sort of stuff. So I think that those two would definitely be in that order, and then Ship 26 will live forever. Of course, it belongs in a museum.
Oh gosh, I knew that was coming.
I mean,
Trevor,
from a
help me.
historical, yeah, Ship 26 is, let's just say it's going to be scrapped tomorrow, I hope. No, but from a historical perspective, I mean, SpaceX saved the first Falcon that landed, so do they save the first Starship or Super Heavy that landed?
I sure hope so. I do think they will, but the data will come before the preservation.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously the big thing is those warped engine bells, see if they maybe take them off and fire them over at McGregor. And I say that as we see if we can take a look underneath Ship 31 here at the Raptors that are currently installed. Which already static fired, already ready to go, it seems like, for flight. It's going to take a moment to appreciate the sounds of the SPMT as it goes by. Just a moment. D, for those who are kind of just seeing these roles for the first time, how exactly do these SPMTs work?
Talking while muted, perhaps.
Or possibly just too loud? Look at that. Hopefully you can hear me now over the noise of the SPMT. I mean, I love that rumble almost as much as a rocket launch, but there's just something about the sheer power of that many wheels rolling by. So, D, for those who don't know, how exactly does this SPMT move a giant ship and or booster?
Yeah, so they are these vehicles, like as you said, that have a ton of wheels that are sort of individually steerable. So they're able to spread the weight of the ship or the booster over a very large area to support this. One of my favorite things about these moves is sometimes when we have photographers like Jack right at the side of the road, they can get some cool sneak peek shots at the engines on here before they're lifted.
And the other cool part is that there's not a person riding on board. It's just some guy walking down the road with a little box. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm just steering Ship 31 out to the launch site. No big deal.
Absolutely. It's always really cool to see that. And it's also important to note just how loud some of these transports are. They move generally incredibly slowly, but when Max and I and Julia have been at Vulcan rollouts, we actually get handed hearing protection to wear because we are close enough that the noise that of the energy that's required to move these massive rockets can actually damage your hearing from too close.
The major difference being this one's on more of a portable truck, whereas Vulcan and Atlas roll out on a set of tracks.
Absolutely, yeah.
Let's see. Here's a question from the NDW Aviator, celebrating 10 months as a member. Trevor, why do you think they're installing Raptor V2s on Ship 33?
Oh, do we know that for sure now that it's Raptor 2 and not Raptor 3? Yeah, this is just something that we speculated for a while, or we're wondering for a while if it's going to be Raptor 2 and Raptor 3. And it could just be that Raptor 3 isn't quite ready yet, right? We've seen some testing at McGregor, but not a ton. Like, I think we've only seen on the order of 100 tests or so, um, which, is a lot, but a lot fewer than they've had for Raptor 2. So it could just be that it's probably just that Raptor 3 isn't quite ready yet, and they'll do that upgrade at some point when it is ready.
We also haven't seen a fully flight-ready V3 yet, have we? It
At
was the
least
one that
not
was
that
shown
we.
off, and I know there
Yeah,
was a RUD at like the test stand recently, but we haven't seen one physically.
yeah, but that definitely is not to say that there doesn't exist one, since right, we don't get the view of Raptors being delivered and whatnot that we used to. But I do imagine that Elon or SpaceX will post when there's the flight set of Raptor 3s at Starbase.
Oh, I'm sure there'll be a picture, or potentially another Cybertruck and another drone that might crash into it. Too soon.
That was such a wild shot when we first saw that happen. We know that they're like constantly trying to get video, and a lot of it we never see, but that was a really unique shot that we've gotten to see both the perspective from the drone from SpaceX, as well as one of our photographers out in the field who captured the aftermath of that.
Yeah, I mean, we still see drones flying all over the place that SpaceX operates down at Starbase. That one was just not the smoothest operation, but it was funny. Here's an interesting question. It's directed towards me, but I'm gonna throw it out to everyone here. Galadriel Squirrel says, Sawyer, I think, in my honest opinion, that SpaceX will be launching a Starship with a batch of the bigger Starlink satellites in 2025. What do you think? I personally think, and then I'll throw it to Trevor and then D, I think yes. I wouldn't be surprised if they start testing orbital payloads in this upcoming year. And if you're going to test a payload for a first payload, why not test some Starlink satellites? Maybe some of the older ones so that in case they don't work, it's not the end of the world. And then once you get that narrowed down, go for the higher end V2 or V3 Starlinks. I don't know. Trevor, what do you think?
Yeah, I fully agree. I think there's probably less than 10% chance that we don't see any Starlinks deployed from Starship next year. And I think it would be a tremendous failure on the part of the program if that didn't happen. Right, I think next year there's a number of goals that SpaceX has laid out. The first is, right, obviously reusing a booster. That one probably is a little more optimistic for next year, but let's cross our fingers and hope so. They want to start catching ships next year. They want to do a bunch of the propellant demonstration stuff, and then, of course, deploying Starlink. So next year is going to be an extremely exciting year for this program, and I definitely think that will be one of the things that we get to see.
And D, your thoughts?
I would absolutely agree. I think we're really going to see... It's hard to say that we're really going to see Starship ramp up next year because it's already really ramping up. We had a launch less than a month ago, and we are already seeing the ship roll out for another launch in less than a week. But I think things are really going to pick up. We'll absolutely see... I don't know if we would see older Starlink satellites deployed because they obviously want to have the utmost capabilities. And the V2 minis, it was originally just planned to be V2 Starlinks meant for Starship. And then they have that mini, despite being larger than the V1 satellites, because they were a smaller version of what was going to fly on Starship. And so I wouldn't be surprised if the first time Starship does deploy a payload it is at least what SpaceX expects to be the ready version of their satellite, and then they'll continue to improve from there.
Yeah, that is a good point. It'll be interesting to see which type of Starlinks, but that's the biggest thing, is finally they can hopefully start putting more Starlink payloads onto Starship and utilizing a little less the V2 minis on Falcon 9. Although I don't see those V2 mini launches going away anytime soon. I can definitely see a world where you have both Starship and Falcon flying Starlinks.
Oh, I would absolutely agree, because SpaceX has had so much time now optimizing the flight rate for Falcon 9. So there will be plenty of applications for Falcon 9 to continue to fly alongside Starship. If they... Sorry, that's getting quite loud right now, so I'll let you hear that.
Should be better.
Yeah, so I would fully expect they continue to fly Falcon 9 Starlink launches alongside Starship, and I wouldn't be surprised if those satellites are optimized for slightly different things, whether they're in like Starship's Starlink satellites are in a slightly higher orbit to cover more area with a single one, whether... I'm not even sure. There are just so many different ways that they could make use of the two, because Falcon 9 could put Starlink satellites into orbits that don't necessarily need as much or as many satellites or as much support. There are a ton of considerations there that honestly I'm not quite an expert on.
Well, again, there's also not a lot of information released about those. You don't see any of the Starlink V2 full sizes very often anymore at Starbase. I'm sure they're there. I'm sure there's a bunch of them stored away.
It's also worth noting that we just have no idea what the orbital shells are going to be, since Falcon is placing satellites into the version 2 Starlink shells, and Starship will do that as well. But there are so many additional shells that SpaceX hasn't started filling yet, but is filed for with the FCC. And I swear about at least every 6 months or once a year, there's a new permit that Alex finds of them requesting slightly different shells and whatnot from the FCC. So I don't think we're really going to know about the orbital parameters of the constellation until it happens.
And the crazy thing is, if my memory is correct, just from the Cape alone, already this year, we've seen Starlink launches that start with a 6, so Shell 6, 8, and 10, and then I believe there was 7 and potentially 5 at one point from Vandenberg. It was definitely a 9 in there somewhere. I mean, they're filling up the shells, that's for sure.
And it's crazy. They're launching so many, and they're not even always in order. They'll launch one that's several numbers higher than anything else they've launched before, just because of the way that they have allocated and named the missions. And then something slips or something changes, and then, all right, we're launching 4 numbers in the future than what you might expect.
What, like that they launched 6-69 today, and 6-66 is launching on the 16th?
See, that I find understandable. The part that confuses me the most and annoys me the most is we have different Starlink shells that are seemingly going to the identical orbits. So it's like, what is the difference between like a shell 6 or shell like 9 and shell 10 when they're like both not 9. They're 2 shells that are basically identical. I can't remember which 2. And it's like, what are the difference between these? Anyway, rant over.
You might say SpaceX is playing a bit of a shell game.
Hey, listen to
Now
those
they're not gonna
crickets.
tell us.
That was actually pretty perfect with the crickets. Let's see here. Cohen getting a couple items from the shop. Thank you very much. One of those, I believe, is a print from Max. Oh, the catch. I love that shot. And then another shot here from Starbase. Thank you very much for the support, and hopefully those are proud. Hey, that's the one that got hit by the drone. Perfect timing. Thank you very much for getting those. Astro Knucklehead saying, curious, Raptor 3 implementation. What do you think, Trevor? Booster or ship first, and what number? They think ship 37, booster 17.
So, I think it'll probably be ship first, but I think it's much more important on the booster. Or right, like the booster is what a lot of the design criteria of it are for, like no engine shielding and whatnot. And that said, what versions? I believe we just started seeing stacking of B-17, and that is still Block 1. Ryan in the back channel, correct me if I am wrong. And then, so it's not going to be until at least B-18 is my understanding. And then additionally for ship, I think we have not seen any signs of it so far. So it'll be a bit until we see Raptor 3 on vehicles, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think we're still maybe towards the end of next year, hopefully. I think once we see even more frequent testing of them down at McGregor, that will be an indicator that we're getting closer to actually flying them. Which, by the way, don't forget, McGregor Live 24/7 right here on NSF. You can watch all of that testing live. Here's one from FFC T-Hawk. D, do you think they'll ever clad the towers, and will Elon's aesthetics be applied?
You know, that is a really good question. My guess would be, for the most part, no. We've seen a lot of cladding be removed from 39A because, like, over time that would wear out. Like, it just wasn't necessary. So SpaceX, I would assume, is just going to protect the sensitive pieces, make sure that the tower can survive repeated launches and repeated landings from both the ship and the booster. And then beyond that, why mess with the aesthetics of the tower?
Yeah, again, if it's not damaging it too bad, might as well keep it as it is. One less thing to have to maintain or replace over time. Delta FX asking, Trevor, do you think Ship 33 would get a static fire this week? Because they have 2 extra transport closures. What would those be for?
So one will obviously be for Booster 13's rollout. That I don't actually know if we have an exact idea of when that's going to happen, but like you said, it will probably be in one of the closures, either tomorrow, or I believe it's November 13th that is the other closer. And the other one, I suspect not. It seems like SpaceX does not want vehicles at the launch site, or extra vehicles at the launch site, since they're just putting them at risk. And Ryan is also saying neither of the closures are for Massey. So yeah, it's probably just closures for booster rollout and yeah.
Well, there are also the SPMTs and the booster transport stand that will potentially be moved away from the launch site. So those could be part of it, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That could be a possibility, because as of now, the primary date says November 13th from 12 to 3 a.m. or 12 to 3 p.m. Central. There is an additional primary date, not alternate, November 14th from 12 to 3 a.m.
And I will say, I am being corrected in the channel. They do not need closures to return the SPMTs, so I'm sorry about that.
That just means you'll have to stick around and watch to see what happens with them then. And those road closures, by the way, you could see them all in Next Spaceflight app, nextspaceflight.com. Here's a question for you, D. Joe X is wondering, would SpaceX install the flight termination system on Ship 31 and Booster 13 while in the barn still, or is that too dangerous?
I would assume not. It definitely makes more sense to get them out to the launch pad before doing so.
Yeah, explosives like that in closed places, not always a great thing. So as we've seen for all of the previous flights, the plan is usually you get it out there, They do the full stack kind of test, make sure everything sticks together, and then they take it down and start arming the FTS prior to launch. So it's one of those things where you only really see it out at the pad. You could see also the historic sign as we are at the Rio Grande Valley, right near Starbase, with a cannon on the front and something soon to be shot like a cannon into space right behind it. Here's a really interesting question from Kanan Copeland, and I'm even thinking about this too. This is a speculation question. Trevor, I'll start with you. How long do you think the lull between Block 1 and Block 2 will be? If 33 took as long as 31, would that mean June or July for the 7th flight test?
Yeah, so I do think, unfortunately, the lull will be longer than a lot of us want. But I suspect it'll be probably 2 or 3 months. So I still think we're looking probably at a Q1 launch next year. Just depends on how soon in Q1.
I would
When-
totally
when do
agree
they-
with you. Like, I think they're definitely going to have more of a break than Flight 6 is supposed to have from Flight 5. But as far as, I don't think we'll reach anywhere near like the 6-month mark or anything like that.
I mean, fingers crossed. I'm hoping that they end up doing it right around springtime, so potentially March, April. That would be my hope. Of course, a lot is dependent on Flight 6, if they learn anything additionally from Flight 6, what changes they plan to make for Flight 7, and as a result, I think it's safe to say as well, D, that there are going to need to be some licensing changes if they make enough dramatic changes to the ship.
Absolutely, because they were lucky's not the right word, but they were very fortunate to get both Flight 5 and Flight 6 approved previously, with the changes for Flight 6 already being made aware to the FAA and everything, getting the okay at once. So they had no regulatory holdups to get ready for Flight 6. Once they get past Flight 6, who knows what will change, how long that would take. Certainly, the FAA in the end did have their timeline move up dramatically for Flight 5, and I'm sure everyone at SpaceX and the FAA is working really hard to minimize any impact that the regulatory body can have, because it definitely wasn't a great look when they were saying end of November for Flight 5. Meanwhile, we are now barely into mid-November, and they're ready for Flight 6.
Yeah, that was a bit of a shocking moment, but very glad that got approved. And again, 5 and 6 all set, with 5 flying and even catching. No anomaly investigation was needed after that one, so they could press ahead to Flight 6. Again, a certain Diablo player leaking some audio seemed like it was very close to failure, but it didn't fail, and that's what matters. I've heard that Diablo player's ranked. That's all I know.
Yeah, I know. Like, when we first saw this gaming clip with some really juicy information about Flight 5, I must say, hearing how it was about a second away from a major issue there, but then there was further explanation about like the number of control cycles and how it wasn't actually all that close. It was really eye-opening to know just how different Flight 5 could have gone, and how fortunate like we were that we got to see them catch a booster.
Wait, they caught a booster?
They caught a booster.
Trevor, did you hear they caught a booster?
No, is that on today's Falcon 9 launch? Or launches?
No. They landed those boosters.
Ah, okay.
This one they caught. That joke, I'm surprised it hasn't gotten old, or that it has, and yet we still continue it. Also, Chris Bergen, I did not leak it. Again, the Diablo streamer leaked it. Damien wondering, by the way, as we see Ship 31 continuing to roll towards us. Going back to the TPS and the tiles there, do we know if the whole TPS was replaced just like it was on Ship 30 with this one? Was it just in some areas?
It was the whole thing, with the secondary layer applied in a lot of spots as well.
Yeah, we saw them. It feels like right away as they were taking it off for Ship 30 that Ship 31 was kind of on its way to replacing most of it. I don't know if it was fully replaced, but there were definitely spots I know that were replaced. Also, whoever's music that was, I dislike your music choice, but that's just personal.
Oh, look at that shot with the stars in the background.
Oh my gosh, that's spectacular. By the way, you see the Pez dispenser, which is more for aesthetics at this point than anything. Gotta love the shine on that. I mean, D, you've seen these roll by up in person. It's gotta be quite an experience.
Yeah, it is. I'm sorry. I was just in awe, like, looking at it. It sounds odd to say. It brings me back to something I saw also about a month ago. Oh, look up at those engines.
Oh, yes, we get the engine view. See the 3 sea level, the 3 vacuum there. Or 2 of the 3 vacuum, at least.
Okay, that was a great shot there. Sorry, I was really excited. Yeah, I've seen these transports happen. I think I've seen 3 or 4 out at Starbase now. And that view looking up at the booster really makes you feel small. Looking up at the ship here, my bad. It's something really awe-inspiring to see in person with any rocket when you can be that close.
As it goes by the SpaceX sign and Hoppy. I only say that because a certain Jack buyer may or may not have gotten a shirt that has Glenny on it, so it's payback.
Star Hoppy, you mean?
Yes, Star Hoppy. Exactly. Oh, I'm gonna get some crud
What about
from Jack.
Starry Hoppy?
Ha! Oh, now we're just getting mean.
Yeah, now Ship 31's getting pretty close to the launch site here now. It's getting pretty close to its turn.
And that will be a turn towards Pad A. Where, again, hopefully it'll launch in a couple days. Or, as Andrew Folks put it, only 4 more Falcon 9 launches till Starship.
And you know what? I don't think I'm going to be at any of those.
I mean, we're working on a plan so that the Cape team is there to cover those. But yeah, that's such a unique way to count. I mean, obviously we have the clock in the top left. For those unaware, NET is no earlier than. That is counting down to the opening of the window that SpaceX has noted of 4 p.m. Central on the 18th.
And we just passed 164 hours until launch.
And this one will finally get a later in the day launch. All the other ones have been around 7, 8, 9 a.m. Central. This one, we're finally getting one at 4 p.m. with the window opening there. From a photographer's standpoint, anything like that, D, how does that change how you photograph a Starship launch?
Yeah. First of all, I'm really excited to have a different launch time. So with all the other launches being the morning and at times planned for before sunrise, of course we did get some great color on some of those, but based on the perspectives where you can be, at most you can have sort of 1/2 of the vehicle well illuminated by the sun because it is right around sunrise. Here in the later afternoon, it's going to be the side facing west that's illuminated. So if you are at Isla Blanca, you'll have great view, great light. If you are any of the viewing areas out there at river, at our at outpost, at our river site, it'll really be illuminated by the sun, and it's just going to be different. I think that's the big thing. We've had several launches with that morning sunrise now, and now we're going for the afternoon. And another really exciting part of it is the time of year. Flight 2, a lot of people were saying, and I would say myself as well, Flight 2 was the most gorgeous Starship launch. Flight 3 and Flight 4 for myself, due to clouds and all that, just did not feel as spectacular. And then Flight 5 a month ago was right up there and exceeding Flight 2. And Flight 2 it'll be, I think, exactly a year from Flight 2 for Flight 6.
Yep.
And so I'm really hoping everything goes well there and we can get just some gorgeous views.
Yeah, and I also do want to quickly correct myself. Thank you, Ryan, for pointing this out to me. No, the entire heat shield was not replaced on this ship. They only redid the adhesive areas and added the ablative section under the flaps. So thank you, Ryan. I totally misinterpreted what SpaceX's post said.
There we go. Always good to just clarify those little details for you, because we want to make sure we're as accurate for you as possible. And you can see it getting that much closer to the launch site ahead of launch. Oh, it's so gorgeous. I guess the other question when it comes to the photography there, would it be late enough for a jellyfish? I don't think so, given that the sun sets there around, 5:45-ish, 6? And if that goes for 4?
It's definitely too early for a jellyfish. The important thing for a jellyfish to happen is the sun is below the horizon, but the rocket is reaching a point in the sky where the sun's light is still hitting it, so that its exhaust gases can be illuminated from the sun, but you don't have all the light from the sun hitting the ground. So I don't think we are going to get one. I'm back in East Coast and like my sunset time, so it doesn't look like it'll line up here. However, I think the first jellyfish from Starship will be gorgeous. And that's something we were thinking might have happened on Flight 5 until it shifted a bit and then the sun was up, which I must say, it was still an even more gorgeous view, I would say.
The lighting on that was absolutely stunning, especially for the catch.
It really was. The amount that the light changed from the moment of liftoff and during countdown to the moment of landing was really dramatic, and that does require, like, as you're shooting, you're actively changing settings. And I was tracking the booster from liftoff to landing and also changing the settings on my camera to adjust for the increasing light levels. So anytime that it's particularly close to sunrise or sunset, there are constant adjustments in the exposure to get the shot that you're looking for. And more midday does make that a little bit easier. Unless a cloud blocks the sun, you can pretty much set your settings and forget about it.
Oh, it's nice when you can set it and forget it with those. The angry engineer wondering, again, going back to the thermal protection system, Trevor, on top of Ship 31, it looks like 4 white spots. Are they intentionally leaving those areas without tiles?
I'm not exactly sure what they're alluding to, but I think it's probably the aluminium tiles that we were talking about a bit earlier.
Yeah, probably. But there are spots where they're leaving tiles empty, though, correct?
Yes, so this is actually a very good view of it. You can see that heat shield doesn't go anywhere near as far back to the leeward side as it did before. It kind of stops right as that windward side is about to end. And so they removed about 8 columns of those heat shield tiles. And that's just so they can get some data on a heat shield configuration that they would want for catching.
That's what it's all going to come down to, is getting that thermal data. That seems super important for this flight. And I mean, Brandon Swain also asking, what are the goals for Flight 6? I think that is a major one of them, Trevor.
Yeah, so that's a major one of them, is just kind of getting more thermal data. As we were talking about earlier, right, there's going to be the Raptor in-space burn that they want to get data for. And then they also are doing some more profile changes during the re-entry to try to, test max heating. I think higher max heating, test the amount of control that they have from the flaps and whatnot. So it really just is the, they learned a lot from the last flight, and they showed they can do that profile under nominal circumstances. So now, what about slightly off nominal circumstances? And that's what we'll see tested on this flight.
I mean, we've seen how they do with other off-nominal circumstances, but those were not intentional with, like, Flight 2 and all of that.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good kind of summary of what we can expect. And while it's very similar to Flight 5, it does have those extra objectives, that in-space burn as well, the single-engine burn for the ship, and also proof that you can catch it twice. As we see Ship 31 playing a little peekaboo there through the tower, finally popping its way out. Want to thank a couple more people here. Joshua, thank you for becoming a PadRat member. William Foss, thank you for gifting a Red Team membership. Eric S., thank you for becoming a PadRat member. And Astro Knucklehead, a ping pong ball for Sawyer. Thanks for all you do. Feel like I'm missing a reference there, unless I've just been ping-ponging back and forth too much between topics. Am I missing something? Anyway. Kyle Fleming is wondering, and this is a good question. Do you think they'll try for the first orbital profile with the 7th flight, if everything goes well with Flight 6?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Honestly, I'll start off by saying I'm not sure. My guess would be no. I would think they would want to really have that preparedness. They'd want to have more in-space burns, but I could be very wrong there. Either of you, please step in here.
I mean, none of it is known at this point. It's kind of just what your thoughts and opinions are on it. Trevor, what about you?
I think probably not. I think they'll want to get one test of Starship V2 under their belts before that, but I, again, hope I'm wrong.
I could see them potentially doing it, while you're already modifying the launch license and trying a whole bunch of other things. Why not throw in an orbit, give you some time to test, if this engine test, I should say, goes well on this flight, proof that you can ignite the engine in a way that would simulate a re-entry in a way.
And it's also... Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. I was also going to say, it's important to note that just like last time, right, the in-space Raptor relight is not guaranteed to happen. If they are not totally happy with all of the data, they will just omit that test and go on with the re-entry as planned.
And that seems to be the case with most of the Starship objectives, including the landing. If you remember, for Flight 5, not only was there the onboard systems that did the check, but you had to have the physical go and a button press, essentially, from the Launch Control Center to go ahead and confirm, yes, we are going to try and land and be caught back at the chopsticks.
Yeah, SpaceX goes into that. They have a whole paragraph about that, saying that both the vehicle needs to have its criteria met, the pad's criteria have to be met, and all those systems have to be healthy, and the flight director has to input a command manually. And if that doesn't take place, they'll go for a splashdown. And they actually finish that saying, "We accept no compromises when it comes to ensuring the safety of the public, and our team, and the return will only take place if conditions are right. So I'm certainly hoping that all those conditions are right and we see another successful catch. But I won't lie, I was taken very off guard last flight when we actually saw it happen. I wasn't that optimistic, and I think this time around I am far more optimistic that we will see it.
Yeah, I couldn't be the only one waiting for the, flight director to say, abort the landing or no go for the catch. And they're like, go for catch. It's like, no way.
It really is just unbelievable that they caught that first try. Like,
They caught a booster. Still boggling my mind.
I definitely would, if you would have asked me in 2015 when SpaceX first landed a Falcon booster, like, oh, what family of rocket will be the next to do this? I would not have guessed that it was Starship Super Heavy being caught.
I'll agree with you on that. That's for sure. And Astro Knucklehead clearing up that it's related to my story from when I flew in 0G, where apparently I was quoted as saying, through every major moment of my life, a ping pong ball from that night randomly shows up. And yes, I do still have a ping pong ball that I received when I was at an event with my grandparents back in 2005 that we've still been passing back and forth to each other, including one that I flew on my 0G flight where they wrote on it, do ping pong balls float in zero gravity? So,
Well, do they?
oh yeah. I did a whole demonstration with it where I was given tips ahead of time of don't throw it, just let it go, which is against every fiber of your being. It's like, no, I'm not gonna. You have to throw it or else it's gonna drop. But no, you just let it go. It's floating right there in front of you. You can poke it and catch it with your hand on the other end. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Sorry for the unintentional Sawyer flex there.
I like these ones. Sharing these unique experiences I find really cool. And now Ship 31 is really close to its destination now.
Yeah, so when we see them roll out here, we've had the ship and the booster here. How do they kind of maneuver and finagle the positioning of this so that they can have it at the launch site there, but then get booster 13 out in the next couple of days, either the 13th or the 14th? Trevor, do you know how they did it last time?
Yeah, I believe they have a transport stand lying around that they'll. Actually, I think they just keep it on the SPMTs, right? And then they'll roll booster out. But I actually don't remember exactly how they did this last time.
I'm trying to remember as well. But I believe they had it set off to the side and then rolled in booster 13 while it was kind of slightly offset, so not right inside the chopsticks, but right near them. And that continues to get closer, and as we continue to get closer, under 164 hours until Flight 6.
Hey, Sawyer,
Yes, Kevin?
do you know what they did with those chopsticks?
No, what?
They caught a booster.
They caught a booster?
They caught a booster?
One might say a booster? Thank you, voice of God, Kevin Michael Reed. I almost forgot,
Yeah, I'm so glad that we get reminded of this at least 2, 3, 4 times every stream, because that moment, I know I will never forget that. That is a really emotional and important moment in my life somehow, not the least of which, like, the people that I got to see something I was sure was not going to happen, that at one point I was like, there's no way that's possible, and I got to see that happen.
It's one of those where it's hard to picture it until it actually happens, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I did that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it looks like we've got Hopper taking an eye up in the sky. It appears to be Jupiter, if my astronomy is correct on that.
Sorry, I want to step in and correct you there. It's Hoppy.
So,
I was
yeah,
thinking the same thing. Thank you.
and of course, Mooney. We're adding wide to everything, right? But yes, and the crowd slowly chants, "Moon, moon, moon." Throwing it back to the Artemis days there. Beautiful shot of the moon tonight. Again, a huge shout out to all of the team that is operating all of the cameras for tonight and the team that runs everything over at Starbase Live, the 24/7 feed. They manage to provide some of the coolest views throughout the day, and even when it can be tricky like this at night, still put out amazing views for everyone to see. So I just want to make sure that we give them a big shout out for the work that they've been doing. Now, as we are talking about the ship, and we talked about the booster caught, what about the ship catch? I know we talked about they're getting ready for it, they're testing for it, but when will we catch a ship on the chopsticks? Speculation time. Trevor, you first, then D.
Oh boy, I think probably like no earlier than late next year, like Q3, Q4.
All right. D?
I think that's a pretty good estimate because there are a lot of things that they have to get right before a ship catch. They're going to have ship be orbital, for one. I have no doubt that they will also have a payload deploy before they go for a ship catch. That would definitely be my guess. And so, since they're going to the next version of ship, and I guess since I think our prediction was at least a few months away for Flight 7, and then I would expect a bit longer for Flight 8. I think the absolute earliest second half of next year, and I think that's optimistic. A bit optimistic, not too optimistic.
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb then and put a date on it, because Flight 2 was, I believe, November 18th. Flight 6 is November 18th. So I think that they're going to catch the ship on November 18th.
I will say,
2025.
I do like that guess. And I was asked this while I was in Texas last launch for Flight 5. And I think that was the day of or the day after launch that I wrote down my guess. And I wrote it as my next birthday, so next June, which I do think I was a bit optimistic there, but who knows? Maybe I'll be right.
Everyone remember that so we can get D a big birthday gift. Let's see. We've got Lords of Random coming in with some support, saying SpaceX should dig a hole, put Ship 32 inside, and dig it back up, especially when the aliens invade. No, I think the ship that needs to be buried, if anything, starts with a 2 and ends with a 6.
You're gonna summon God again.
So be it. I believe in the burying or disposal of Ship 26. Mwahahaha.
Excuse me.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi. I actually wasn't paying attention, and then I heard something horrible.
Oh my gosh, you weren't paying attention. Wait, you weren't paying attention? You're supposed to be running the stream.
I mean, yes, that's what I'm doing, but I wasn't listening to you.
I think the horrible thing you heard was D saying that Ship 26 is good.
D is correct. D is on the correct team.
Thank you, Kevin.
I'm sorry, but dare I say the opinion of that is D tier.
Ooh.
Okay, that was. I'll give you credit. That was at least a slightly unique version of the usual puns for my name that I get. So I'll give you a pun token for that one.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a new one. I know I've made some terrible ones in person. That was a new one. I guess let's get back to actual questions here as things finish rolling up. I stole your toast. First off, give me my toast back. Second, Trevor, they're wondering, why doesn't SpaceX make the ship QD faster so it doesn't damage it every time?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of those
I
you'd
would
have to ask
imagine that.
SpaceX and find out, right?
Yeah, I would imagine that this is something that they'll incorporate in Launchpad 2 design. Right, they've learned a lot from this pad layout, having had 5 flights, soon to be 6, and a bunch of other testing. And, there are things that make sense to improve on this pad, and there are things that are just like, it's not worth the hassle. Let's just have a clean design and implement it there. And then, of course, as Elon has mentioned many times, this pad will eventually be retrofit to what we see at pad B whenever that pad is sufficiently operational. So it's almost certainly is something that will be improved in the second pad.
Yeah, this kind of feels like a stopgap in the way, or if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of deal of, yeah, they have to fix it, but once they get everything running and test it out over at Pad B, hopefully they'll set the standards of what they'll be using in the future for Pad A here, for hopefully the 39A pad, any adjustments they make, the second pad that they build at in Florida, whether that be 36 or 37 or 49, wherever they end up placing that next tower. I think that's going to be Tower B is going to be the big one here of, hey, this is the mistakes that we made, this is how we fix them, and now let's go do this to the others.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like what we saw happen to Slick 40, right? They had a bunch of suboptimal design that they learned from and implemented those changes on the LC39A pad, which turned out to be a very good thing that they did that when a certain anomaly happened.
A most unfortunate time, yes. Here's a good question from Gunfox61, and I think this is very much a D question. If you had to pick one for Starship, Dusk or nighttime launch?
Oh, just one? Not which one I want to happen first?
No, you can only pick one. Let's say they're willing to set the window to whatever time you ask for, either dusk or night.
Oh, okay. That's a really rough question. I appreciate that it was directed to me there. I have to say dusk before nighttime. We're gonna get nighttime starships at some point, I'm sure. But if there's some sparks from the OLM. Work continues on the OLM. Sorry. I have to say, I want to see the Dusk launch first, because if you throw a dart at a board and you land on any given random time, you've got a 50-50 chance of it being night. So I'd much rather aim for that sliver of dusk.
Yeah, let's just say the people at the OLM, by the way, are making it feel at home with the sparks. But yeah, and the other thing is, I mean, night launches are absolutely spectacular. You get a gorgeous view. The streak shots that you get with a Methalox engine, oh, the one I have from the first Vulcan flight, so blue. But at the same time, you don't really get to see as much of the ship. Whereas with a little bit of light still at dusk, you get some of that, you'll still be able to see the effects as it passes through the thicker parts of the atmosphere, the return, all of the little thruster adjustments better, instead of just a giant ball of light.
Okay, so important question driven by Kevin in the back channel. If I choose a night launch, can I guarantee that that launch has a transit opportunity with the moon? Because if I could guarantee that that night launch had a moon transit opportunity, I would go for a night launch over a dusk launch.
Oh. I mean, Yeah.
I can't do math. That's not what I do.
But in this theoretical world where you literally get to pick the launch time, yeah, I could see the benefit of doing the lunar transit. But again, you've got 3 seconds essentially at most to fire away in hopes of getting one shot versus Dusk, where at least you have multiple chances. If,
Well,
say, one of them slightly out of focus, you need to quick refocus, you can do that.
as someone who focuses on video, I get about 120 frames per second. So I think I'll be okay there. But now Ryan, a little bit making fun of me in the back channel. Yes, I think actually a moon transit at dusk would be even better than a moon transit at night as well.
You'd
Wait,
certainly see
so
more
just to
detail.
get this right, D, you shoot at 120 FPS and then ruin it by slowing it down to 24.
Are you going to make me go on a passionate speech about this? Because I will gladly go on a passionate speech about the value of 24 frames a second, so long as you know the frame rate that you're shooting at and why emotionally you are choosing said frame rate and said shutter speed. I can go on a very long tangent here about cameras, but I don't think that's what the audience wants to hear right now. I think they want to hear about Starship and the moon, maybe.
More frames, more better.
You know what? I'm going to make a note of this. I want to pick this conversation up during the Flame Trench this Friday, because I believe we'll have all of the photographers together at Starbase, hopefully, for the Flame Trench. And I want to ask you guys your thoughts on frame rates then. Deal?
Deal.
All right. And with that, it looks like Ship 31 is in place. All that is waiting now is Booster 13 to do its role, and all of that work ahead of launch just a little under 7 days from now. I want to thank everyone who joined us here tonight. Trevor, thank you so much for your input.
Yeah, of course. It's always really exciting when we're seeing these vehicles rolled out for launch, which we have a T-minus time for already. That is exciting.
Very exciting. And thank you, Dee, covering 2 launches today and then joining us for the rollout. Thank you so much.
Of course, I am happy to be here and get back in the Starbase spirit ahead of Flight 6.
And don't forget, you can keep up to date with everything going on at Starbase Live, which is our 24/7 channel. We also post a lot of Starbase stuff on our social media platforms. So if you're not following us on X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all of those, make sure you are as well. A shout out as well to behind the scenes there. You saw Carson. We've got Mr. Kevin Michael Reed, I believe, or Gage, excuse me, behind the scenes, also helping out, and the entire team behind Starbase Live. I am Sawyer Rosenstein. I have been your host. A reminder, we have another countdown to launch tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern. Set your clocks, and hopefully, we'll see you there. Till then, as Das likes to say, later, nerds.
And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, roger, Atlantic.
Water towers fly! Yes! Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside speed off. Say nsf off. It's orange! 145!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage.
What is it?
Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
If the methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You read? Sure. We don't need any more of these.